Jane Johnston, the Panther Outreach Specialist with Florida Fish and Wildlife, and I was hired to help people know what to do about living with panthers, because if you're in Collier County, these are certainly your neighbors, right? All you guys are Collier County folks. So I have a little bit of a map. I usually start out with where I'm talking, so in the top left corner, that's where we're at, and I have a little bit of telemetry data from 2015 and 2016 of one of our collared panthers. So you can see you don't have to drive very far to encounter panther activity.
So every one of those green dots is where he showed up?
That's correct, yes. Yeah.
Is that one panther or a certain many panthers?
Yep, that's one. And
one panther that has visited all those spots.
right. So you can see where they're utilizing a lot of green spaces in between all the development. And you can access this kind of data. We do publish it on our website. So under the quick maps section, you can take a look at it. And then you can see out further east, a lot more of those green dots show up. So we'll talk a little bit about what is a Florida panther. So the genus is Puma and its species is Collier. This species of Florida panther is Collier. So Charles Bernard Collier is the scientist that looked at different skeletons and skulls of other pumas around North America and discovered that ours had some different types of morphological features, which are physical traits that were different from the other pumas around North America, and that's how it ended up being named after him. So this is our species. This picture was taken out at Dinner Island Ranch. If you guys haven't visited out there, it's a pretty neat space. So by one of our partners, the F-Stop Foundation. Pumas are an American cat. This is the current Puma distribution. So on the left, they are North, Central, and South American cats. And in the green, that's their current distribution. You can see in Florida, very small green area. There's 32 subspecies of pumas. They live in different types of habitats. They have different morphological features. On the right, there's 15 subspecies in North America. You can see we're in the northeastern area. Is anybody from the Northeast? Yeah? Originally, yes, me too.
Yeah, well, no
Yeah.
one wants to admit it.
That's not a bad thing. Most of us came from somewhere else because, you know, we love it here. But yep, so the species there is considered extinct. So what do you have instead? You have a lot of deer up there. The yellow part, that's the range for Collier, for the subspecies. You going to take a picture of that? All right, no problem. The subspecies range, this is a little bit of a closer look. So the historic range was all the states in the blue, including a little bit of southern Tennessee and South Carolina. The red is the current range. So as development happened in the southeastern United States, the panther population can continue to be compressed into the area that you now see in the red. And that's the current distribution.
What type of timing, you say historically, how long ago did they have a range that large?
Well, furthest back as the 1800s, because as development happened, there were bounties that the government would pay to have panthers killed. So, yeah. So that affected their population quite a bit, especially the more and more people started to settle this area.
What does the yellow band represent?
Yeah, it's a good question. The yellow band, it's a very straight line, but that really is where the Caloosahatchee River and the St. Lucie River meet Lake Okeechobee. And the reason that we have the line on there, the Caloosahatchee River and the St. Lucie River were not historically connected to Lake Okeechobee until later 1800s, early 1900s. So what would happen during our dry season and wet season, because if you guys live in Florida now, you know we only have 2 seasons, and in the winter it gets really dry here. So the Caloosahatchee River, there was a watershed there, but there was dry land where panthers were able to easily move back and forth between the northern parts of Florida and the southern parts of Florida. So when those rivers were channeled, it prevented a barrier, kind of created a barrier for the panthers. So that's why we tend to find them more south than north these days. Home ranges for males, it's about 200 square miles, which is a lot of space. Males can share territory. They exercise mutual avoidance, but they don't want to be in the same territory. If they do encounter each other, they may fight to the death over it. So, but typically they just try to avoid each other. As far as females, they're able to have a little bit of a smaller range. They can also tolerate being with their siblings or mother-daughter groups. And you end up with several females inside of one male's range, typically. So you can see where in the male range they overlap. But they use scrapes to identify their ranges. So they use their back feet to pile some dirt and some leaves, and then they urinate or defecate on it in order to mark their territory, which is how they mutually avoid each other. So,
Do you know this because of collars?
yes. Yeah, this data is collected from collared panthers. Their physique, so the average adult's 60 to 160 pounds. The male averages about 130. I brought a male specimen today. He was unfortunately hit by a car out in the Clewiston area. He was about 155 pounds when he was hit by a vehicle. Females average 80 pounds, so while he's a little bit on the higher scale of weight, she's actually a little bit lower, 60 pounds, and she was pregnant when she was hit by a vehicle. So. Yep, so, and that's how I have all my specimens today. We'll talk a little bit about that. So they're about 4.5 feet long. They have a pretty long tail. It's almost as long as their bodies, and they stand about 2.5 feet high. The tan fur is really important, and we'll talk a little bit more about that on the next slide, but it can be a reddish tan or to a golden tan type of color. They do have some black markings on the back of their ears. Important to see the back of the ears of a panther are different from a bobcat. Bobcats have a little bit of a white patch there too, but the panther ears are going to be completely black. Tip of the tail is black, and then they have some black facial markings too. The kittens, however, are spotted, and they have blue eyes. So they do keep those spots until about 6 months old. They may lose them. Some of them we've seen keep on 1.5 years up to 2 years old. But yes, mistaken identities. I do get asked pretty frequently at events and other talks that I give about black panthers. And there are no black panthers. Florida panthers are not black. There are other animals referred to as black panthers, like the jaguar and the leopard. They can come in black colors. And then we have found black bobcats and black coyotes in Florida. So that's entirely possible. And even black house cats have been misidentified as black panthers. So figure that animals particularly active in the evening hours, you usually don't get a really good look at them. They don't stand under a light for you. Reproduction, so it takes about males about 3 years to be able to reproduce, and the females about 1.5 years. They do breed year-round here in Florida. It takes about 3 months for gestation to occur, where they give birth. They do like to have their dens under saw palmetto thickets, so the female makes a big enough space for her and the kittens to be able to stay in there. Kittens will stay with her inside the den until they're about 2 months old, and then she'll start introducing them to her territory. They have average 2 to 3 kittens. They can have as little as 1 or up to 4. Total. And then they disperse around 9 months to 1.5 years. So when the kittens are about the mom's size and they're about this age, that's when they'll depart. So if you ever hear about stories about seeing multiple cats, it's going to be typically the mother with her kittens, even though they look as big as she is. Natural life expectancy, this is if nothing else happens to our Florida panther. Male, it's about 10 years. Females, it's about 15. So males live a little bit. Males live less than the females. So if you think about in terms of reproduction, the males are only reproductive for about 6 years of their natural lives, and females are reproductive about twice that long.
Is the tenure a genetic thing that males just live less shorter than females, or is it because males have a lot of aggression and are killing each other so often?
That's a possibility, yeah. They have a little bit of a different type of lifestyle in the female. I mean, the ranges are larger, and yes, they can encounter they move around a lot more, they encounter other males. So, yeah, other things get to them, they age.
Basically solitary, or do they pair up?
Yeah, so panthers are mostly solitary, particularly the males. The times that you'll see them paired up with a female for reproduction, they're probably together for about a week. But otherwise, they're by themselves. Yeah, and after he mates with her, he's also not helping her raise the kittens. So, yes, that's a good question. Food, they're carnivores. Deer and hogs make up their primary diet. However, they will eat other things, armadillos and raccoons and so other small mammals, and unfortunately, they will eat things that belong to people, pets that belong to us, livestock that belongs to us. So see, we have a long list of some interesting things that have unfortunately been eaten at people's homes. So even alpacas and wallabies, which are like kangaroos. So we have a long list of these animals. Unfortunately, if it's made of meat, a panther will eat it. They are an umbrella species, so they're an apex predator. There isn't anything that predates them except us, of course, which is no longer legal to do in the keystone species. So if you end up eliminating the Florida panther from the environment, from the habitat, then there are other issues that start to happen below there of the other animals that they eat. So we talked about a little bit in the Northeast. You no longer have puma up there. You have a lot of deer instead, which creates a whole other set of issues of its own. So with ecosystems, you know, if you remove any element of it, you alter any element of it, it changes how it works, how it behaves. So I know a lot of people don't like hogs, so if you can imagine if we didn't have a Florida panther, how many more hogs there would be. Some people don't like those, and they're pretty invasive. So
It's the first time I'm hearing umbrella species.
really,
Can you define?
yeah. So what it means is that it's a species that supports a bunch of other species underneath it. So. And it's the combination of their being at the top and the other ones being underneath that make the ecosystem work in the way that it does. Does that make sense?
Sure, thank you.
Okay. Yeah, question?
What's the green underneath the pod?
Yeah, some acorns. So you have turkeys that eat acorns and they spread seed. And so there would be habitat alteration. If you had an overabundance of turkeys, then you would end up with a different type of habitat if you had more oak trees being. Yeah, that's okay. No worries. Florida panther is an endangered species. So we talked a little bit about, we were asking about what was impacting their, you know, why did they get compressed in Southwest Florida? You know, prior to the 1950s, you could hunt them. There wasn't any really regulation on them. Even earlier in the 1900s and the 1800s, people were paid to actually kill them. So, but by 1950, they were declared a game species to try to give them some protections. So the number that you could get, the limits and the season were regulated, but it didn't take very long. In 1958, they were listed as endangered by the state of Florida. In 67, the U.S. listed them as endangered, and then with the inception of the Endangered Species Act, they were then listed as an endangered species in 1973, and they've been on that list ever since. So a little bit about the Endangered Species Act and the Florida panther. So the Endangered Species Act is to help animals not go extinct. That's the purpose of it. So they identify animals that are on the verge of extinction, and then they receive federal protections. And a lot of the work then is implemented through the state agencies in order to recover the species. So they set different types of recovery plans, and usually they're related to some kind of number. You know, they're trying to reach a target. What's a sustainable population? So endangered is their current status. We do keep track of their population counts. The best we can do is estimate them because they're such solitary creatures. You know, they don't get easily counted and they have very large ranges. But we use a lot of public lands for this purpose. So Big Cypress and Fakahatchee, Picayune, you can find panthers on all these properties, and some private lands. So their population estimate was upgraded, and the low number is 120, but there could be as many as 230 adults and subadults out there. Subadults are those that have left their mothers, but they're not of reproductive age yet. So the next step is, after they come off the endangered list, they go to the threatened list, which means they've met some kind of recovery. In the case of the Florida panther, they have to have at least 2 distinct populations of 240 adults or subadults to be taken off the endangered list and put on the threatened species list. Well, we don't yet even have one population of 240, so we have some work to be done. And the reason I put a picture of a manatee here is because they were recently listed from endangered to threatened just this past year, because they're starting to reach some of those recovery numbers, some of those recovery goals. And not listed. That's either you're endangered, threatened, or you don't have to be listed at all under the Endangered Species Act. Though, and I have a picture of an American alligator because it is no longer an endangered species, but it's still protected by the state of Florida. So important. Some people sometimes wonder if, okay, so if we reach recovery, then what happens? Well, it's still a protected animal. That's what happens, because we don't want to get back to the point where we have to recover it from the brink of extinction. So given our current population estimates and the growth, which is very slow, we're down to about 20 to 30 panthers back in the early 1990s, and we're up to 120 to 230. We have a little ways to go. We also have to get other states to be able to have populations there too. Yes?
With so much development in Southwest Florida,
Mm-hmm.
is it reasonable to think that that we would have enough open space for a male to have 200 square miles? Is there enough room for that?
Well, we know that males are here and that they do, but what it also means, and one of the reasons for my talk today, is that they're utilizing space where we've already developed. They're utilizing space where we live. So because they're, particularly in the Golden Gate Estates area, there's a lot of natural space still available for them, plus they're adjacent to public lands. So yeah, now we expect that that range will need to expand, of course, as the population grows, because yes, males are going to need to seek out different areas. And we have had some males leave Southwest Florida. So I'll talk about that in a moment.
I'm sure the fire is affected.
Well, so fire would affect them as far as their prey is going to move, they move. So now then fire burns through, vegetation recovers pretty quickly, and as soon as the deer return, panther may return. Of course, they do like to be able to have cover. So, but yeah, it could cause some movement, but because their ranges are so large, they probably went to a different part of their range because the entire range wouldn't necessarily be burnt. So, yeah. But what's impacting it? So habitat loss is one of the things that's still impacting the panther's ability because, of course, they like the same places we like to live. They like to be in pine uplands and hardwood hammocks. And that's also where we like to build, you know, our houses, schools, businesses. So that's one of the factors. Introduced diseases, feline leukemia. Feral cats or domestic cats that are diseased, panthers do eat them. And if they have feline leukemia virus, then the panther then contracts the virus and it also dies. So always encourage people to have your pets vaccinated. Keep them inside and secure. It's always a good one too.
Should panthers be vaccinated against that?
If you could get them, I don't know. I don't know that you could do that. That would be a little more difficult. A lot easier to get domestic cats. Or, well, I don't know about feral cats vaccinated. So, yeah. It's a good question.
Tranquilize them like they do in Africa, give them a shot.
Yeah, so some of the challenges with being able to capture and collar panthers and anesthetize them for those purposes, if we wanted to vaccinate them, is having access to them because they're in such a wide space and they're on some private lands.
Why can't they vaccinate them when they put the collars on them?
That's a good question. I will find out and I will answer that question at the end.
They're there, why can't they give them a shot?
Oh, okay. Yeah. Okay. Well, I'll answer that question at the end. So, okay, good questions. You guys are bringing good questions. Inbreeding is one of the other things that impacted the population, particularly when they were down to the number of 20 and 30, because then you started to have family-related, panthers-related, you know, reproducing with each other, you know, parents with offspring, siblings, that kind of stuff. So some of the evidence of that outwardly was the cowlick, which on the female mount you can see where her fur is sticking up, and also kinked tails where it would be a little crook. I have a picture of it on one of my banners. But inwardly what was happening is they would end up with a hole in their heart, which made it almost impossible to reproduce, and of course they didn't live very long either as a result. And for males, their testes wouldn't descend, you know, or they may lack testes, so they weren't able to reproduce either. So that's some of the evidence that we knew that inbreeding was occurring, and yeah, so, and we'll talk about how do we fix that. Illegal killing. On the bottom right is a picture of a gentleman that shot a Florida panther in Georgia in 2008. So I talked about we do have males that will move out of the area because they need to disperse. They need to find other places. Of course, they're not necessarily always have females where they're going, but traveled all the way up to Georgia, was shot by the hunter. Unfortunately, you know, it is illegal to shoot a Florida panther, even if it's not in Florida. I'm sure he didn't know at the time it was a Florida panther, but he wasn't permitted to be able to shoot a large cat. So they were able to do a DNA recovery on the cat and find out that it was a Florida panther. So penalties for harming, hurting, harassing, shooting, of course, killing a panther could be up to $100,000 and a couple years in jail. So it can be pretty severe. And vehicles. So mentioned today that all my mounts were hit by cars. That's how I got them. But not to end on a sad note. Yes, question?
Well, what about pythons? What impact do they have?
It's a good question that I don't know that we know the answer to yet. I imagine we'll find out as time goes on. So they do compete for the same prey, of course, because there is proof that pythons eat deer. So of course that's competing for the same food that panthers rely on. So that we know, but as far as anything else, we don't know yet. But I'm sure time will tell on that one. the more we learn about pythons.
Well, do you know anything now?
Just that they compete for the prey sources, but I don't know that we know much more than that. Yeah.
Do panthers eat pythons or vice versa?
If they do, we're unaware of it. So, yeah.
Haven't found any pythons yet with panthers in their bellies?
No. Not that I've heard about. So, but not to get off track too much on a bad note, that's why I want to bring us back to the recovery efforts. So genetic restoration was one of the things we were able to do to get the population to increase from the 20 to 30 then to the 120 to 230 that we have now. What they did was back in the mid-90s, 8 female Texas cougars were introduced into the ecosystem with collars on and mated with our resident male panthers. And after a sufficient number of litters were produced, then they were recaptured and sent back. I do get asked the question about if female Texas cougars are still out here, but no, because that was a long time ago, and the natural life expectancy.
Why did they send them back?
Because we no longer needed them. We had a sufficient number of. Yeah, and it was only females, so it wasn't the males. And of course, the offspring stayed here. We didn't send the offspring back. So that's helped a lot. It's gone a long way. Habitat preservation. There's been quite a bit of this. Mitigation. So you asked about a lot of the development. Development in panther habitat usually requires some kind of compromise between the developers and the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. So conservation easements, and that falls under people with large private acreage are able to set aside usually about 1/3 of their lands for natural spaces and be compensated by the state of Florida for doing that. So that helps not only the panther, but of course all the other native species that we have here that are under the same duress as the panther. And publicly held lands, and that's a lot where we do our studies with panthers on Big Cypress and Everglades and the Florida Panther National Wildlife Refuge. So encourage you guys to visit any of those spaces if you have a chance. And underpasses. So if vehicles are killing a lot of panthers, what can you do about that? Underpasses, much easier to install, pre-putting the road in. To go back and retrofit roads for it, a little bit more difficult, mostly cost prohibitive, but it can happen. There's a picture of an underpass there. They do work. It's the combination of the underpasses and the fencing together. And then they do some landscaping to attract panther prey to those areas, and then that way the panthers will follow. So there is a new way that they're trying to look at underpasses, because you notice that when we're driving on roads we pass over a lot of water. So there's been some work done to put some shelving in as another additional pathway, and preliminarily it looks like it's going to work. So only a long-term study and time will tell if that's a better permanent solution.
I don't understand the shelving.
Yeah, so with a waterway, and they're able to put a bank right next to it to where it's enough space for animals to crawl underneath.
Thank you.
You're welcome. So panthers have been documented in 3 of the 5 FWC regions. So even though we know a panther, there's a little asterisk all the way at the top, made it all the way to Georgia. So that doesn't necessarily mean that they're not in the other regions. They can turn up anywhere in the state. But we have to have concrete proof of that. It has to be panther photo or panther tracks, and we have to be able to verify where it was taken. But we do now have documented 2 females and kittens north of the Closatchee River. So we have not had a proof of a female north of the river since 1973.
Why not more south, or is that just all marshland?
Well, the Everglades have a mix of different types of ecosystems, and so panthers still want to be in the hardwood hammocks and pine uplands areas, and so it tends to get a little bit more wet down there. So, panther population growing, our population also growing, and creates an opportunity, additional opportunities for there to be interactions between humans and panthers. So the Florida Panther Response Plan was created in anticipation of these opportunities, and what can you do? There are things that can be done. So we wanted to promote public safety, but also be able to still conserve the panther. So this is mostly about us. The response team consists of a collection of people from different agencies. They meet once a year. They report to the Senior Level Oversight Committee, which is on my next slide. And they produce an annual report, which you can find on our website if you're interested in reading it. There's a lot of good information in there. Talks about different types of human-panther interactions and other things going on in the world of panthers. So from each agency, you have a representative as a panther biologist, law enforcement, a public information officer. And then the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, we also have one of the refuge managers and a panther coordinator, which ties everything together as liaison. So we coordinate with federal agencies as well as state agency. And then the Oversight Committee, it's a little higher level oversight over all the activities of the response team. And that's a little bit of a higher level. You can see with the superintendent of Big Cypress and Everglades, the manager for the National Wildlife Refuge, so the director. And these folks oversee everything that the team does. So now about the Florida Response Plan. So this is all about human-panther interactions and classified 5 ways, going from the lowest risk to the highest risk. So sighting, encounter, incident, threat, and attack. And depredations is separate. It is considered a type of human and panther interaction, but it's not direct. Usually if a panther has unfortunately eaten something that belongs to you, you probably didn't encounter the panther directly, but that's like an in between. And then outreach, that's me. That's what I'm doing today.
Have there been any panther attacks, number 5 up there?
No recorded and verified attacks of a panther on a human. So. And hopefully, I'm educating people enough and it won't happen. Tell you what to do. Sighting is low risk. So this is just a visual observation. It's a fleeting glimpse. You can see the gentleman there in the picture. He's taking a picture. He's in the picture, taking a picture of a panther that's walking away. And so we consider verified records as photo evidence of the panther or tracks. So otherwise it's unverified if we can't find any physical evidence that you saw the panther. Panther behavior should be that retreats at the sight of humans, displays a lack of attention. You can see how that one's looking away but kind of looking back to see what's going on. He's kind of, I want to see where you're at while I walk away. That's to be expected. Did you guys, take a look at this next one. Did you guys see the video out at Corkscrew Swamp Sanctuary with the lady and yeah. And that's kind of interesting.
Moment for somebody, yeah.
Well, it looked like they were both terrified of each other, honestly. That's what I thought was most hilarious about it. They were equally terrified of each other, and that's what you would expect. So, but talking about how panthers like pine uplands and hardwood hammocks, probably didn't want to get in the water and get his feet wet, so they utilize boardwalks during the summertime, mostly. So they don't like to avoid wet areas. Probably a good chance there was other human activity on that boardwalk that day. So made for a great video.
What about other places in the country where there have been attacks by, well, they call them mountain lions and cougars there,
Right.
but aren't they basically the same?
They are Puma and Collier, so they're the same species, just
Why
a different
are they
subspecies.
attacking, like bikers?
So one of the things that we'll get to toward the end is what do you do if you encounter a panther? And the number one thing is don't run. So if you are behaving as prey would, which is to run or to be active or to be going away from a cat, that very likely may have caused that type of reaction. I'm sure the person probably didn't see them,
Well, there was
Very
one
well.
where there was 2 bikers and the cougar attacked the biker from behind, jumped down on her while she was biking through.
While she's biking, yeah. It's a good question. I'll see if I can find out some more information for you about that. Yes, so an encounter is low to moderate risk, and this is a little bit different. So it's unexpected direct meeting. So well, obviously the person that took this picture a little bit closer than the other guy, and then this one's sitting and looking at the person instead of walking away. So they'll make some movements that are directed at the human, like this one's looking at the person, but they're unaware and they're not approaching, and they're just kind of being curious. They're making eye contact, but eventually they should retreat.
So what are you supposed to do?
Yes.
Make a lot of noise, back up?
Yes, yes, and yes. Oh, no, if you back up, that's the only thing. You want to make sure that you maintain eye contact if you walk backwards. But if you can, panthers are scared of people. So whatever you can do to reinforce that fear, if you want to yell at them, you want to scream at them, you want to appear larger than they are,
Don't turn your back.
Don't turn your back, don't run. Yeah, that's important.
What's the defensive posture?
A defensive posture.
The panther takes a defensive posture.
Yeah,
How does that manifest itself?
probably be up on all fours. Yeah, so. Probably preparing for you because it's still scared of you too. So, incident is our next level. It's moderate to high risk. It's an interaction between a human and panther. So described in the encounter, and then of course there's some additional things that are going on here. They're showing some curiosity. The ears are going to be up. So going to pay more attention to you, and it may shift positions. So intensely staring at you, following, hiding from you, but also still watching you, keeping an eye on you. And they don't retreat when you take some kind of aggressive or offensive action. So, threat is considered high risk. It's an unprovoked aggressive or predatory behavior. So this is a picture of a mounted, not a panther, but a type of cat, because I don't have any pictures of this. And hopefully we can continue to go on as long as we can without being able to even take real pictures of these kinds of things. So, but I sometimes think about panthers, and if you observe cat behaviors and how they stalk prey and how they behave right before they pounce their prey, or sometimes people. So small cats, we're talking about domestic cats. They're crouched, they have twitchy tail, they get their ears back. They're going to start to exhibit some type of behavior as if they're going to attack you. So, and this will be threatening to you if you saw it exhibited from a panther. They're going to put their head low to the ground, and they're going to continue. They're going to start pumping their back legs like they're getting ready to jump. And then attack is the highest risk. And you had asked a question. Yes, no verified record of a panther attacking a person. And yeah, I know you love this picture. It's really, really professional. But that's because we also do not have a picture of this, and hopefully we can keep it that way. And this is a direct physical contact between you and a panther. Fight back, of course. That's what we would tell you to do. Fight back. If you've taken all the other steps, though, that should be unnecessary. So the depredations, low risk. It is a panther that preys on domestic pets or livestock. So something's happened to your pet, usually not while it's with you or attached to you. So I know some people have concerns about walking their pets on a leash and that kind of thing. You can just bring your pet closer and exercise the other things that you can do once we get to that slide. Most of the interactions involve depredations. So all of the red graph lines, those are the depredations. You can see how many more of those that are happening than some encounters over the years. This is over a 10-year cycle. Incidents, just really showing up in 1 year there between fiscal year 2010, 2011. That's when we do our reports, typically between July 1st and June 30th, and we're getting ready to make it a calendar year. So. But yeah, and then threat doesn't show up, and we don't have any place for attack since we don't have a verified record of one. But depredations, is it always a panther? There are other predators that do live here in Florida with us. It could be dogs and coyotes, or bears, bobcats, raccoons, hawks and owls. They all have a different type, a different way that they eat their food, and which is why we are able to determine whether it's a panther or maybe another animal. Of course, we've got other predators we don't know about yet. So you mentioned the python, of course, that's another one. And non-native species arriving all the time in Florida. So we got a lot of those. Sometimes it can be problematic trying to figure out what ate the animals, because if other animals have also been involved. Best way to know, we have to just know right away. But what can you do? If you have animals that you keep outside, we do have plans available for you to build your own predator-proof enclosure, but you can also get assistance. The Defenders of Wildlife will assist you in advance of you losing an animal. If you want to keep any sheep or goats or chickens or anything outside, if you want some financial assistance to help build a pen, they will provide that for you. If you unfortunately have had something taken by a panther and it's been confirmed by one of our biologists with FWC, then you can get additional assistance from the Conservancy of Southwest Florida. Yes, question?
I noticed that some of the other predators, including bobcats,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
bobcats and panthers share any territory.
Yeah, they share territory, but they're same kind of thing, mutual avoidance of each other. The bobcat range is a lot smaller, so there are going to be a lot more of them in a neighborhood than you end up with panthers. But yes, they do share territory. And something I will note too about these predator-proof enclosures to keep in mind about panthers, of course bobcats being smaller, panthers can jump up to 15 feet. So you have to have a top on top of your, they can dig, and so you want to make sure they can't dig underneath your enclosure. You want to make sure their head can't fit through it. Their head can fit through, the rest of the body can get in there. So they can get in there. They may not be able to get out with what they got, but you still don't want them to get in there in the first place. The one predator this doesn't work for 100% would be bears. Bears respond to electric fence. So you may want to add that. If you put one of these in there, add some electric fence, it should be pretty good.
How does the population of bobcats compare to the panther?
It's a good question because I don't know if anybody actually studies or tracks the population of bobcats. I know the range is a lot smaller, so they're a lot more widespread. They're all throughout North America and northern Mexico.
So. One right over the way.
Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised. And yeah, because their range is about 5 to 6 miles normally, but it gets smaller if they're in an urban area. So. Have you seen them?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
And the otter, we got an otter, 5 babies.
Oh.
Yeah, got pictures.
Yeah, that's cool.
Yeah.
Are they smarter? Because I never read about them getting hit by a car, but I always hear about panthers getting hit.
Well, bobcats get hit by cars too, but that's not as newsworthy, I guess, as panthers.
endangered?
Right, no, bobcats, no. So yeah, Florida panthers are endangered species. You know, there's a lot of work done by our agency and by the Fish and Wildlife Service to recover their populations, and so that's why it makes the news when unfortunately they get hit by cars.
Who cares about the bobcats?
I know, but I probably care about it all though. So how can you minimize an interaction? How do you avoid one? Let's get to that part. Panthers being solitary and fearful of humans, the likelihood that you're going to encounter one is probably pretty small, if none. So, but there are things you can do to prevent that from happening, to prevent if you do see one, and what do you do if you do? So be alert from dusk till dawn. They're crepuscular animals, which means they're most active during the sunset and the sunrise hours and the dark hours in between. That does not mean they won't be active during the day. We're most active during the day too, right? But we're up at night. So,
I've seen one
yeah.
crossing the road in
No.
Imperial Golf.
Okay. Yeah. It's possible. We never say impossible. It's totally possible. Keep panther prey away. Don't leave, if you leave food out for cats or dogs or other animals, if you feed wildlife and you attract turkeys and raccoons and things to your yard, you are attracting panthers to your yard too. So, and we have a little picture here of a deer eating some landscaping. If you can avoid any deer-loving plants, that'll keep the deer from coming to your yard too. That'll discourage any panther activity on your property. Keep your pets and domestic livestock secure. So anytime that, I usually tell people, of course, between dusk and dawn and all the hours in between, and then when you're not home, because it's still during the daytime, depredations still occur even during light hours. Landscape for safety. Besides not installing deer-loving plants, if you can put other types of plants there, if you startle a panther by coming outside of your house, the first thing they're going to do is look for cover. So if you have a lot of thick vegetation in your home, that's the first place they're going to hide. So you can try to keep your landscaping clear enough. Don't give them a lot of places to be able to hide and get away from you. Then you won't even know that they're there. So, but if you keep your landscaping clean and clear, that'll be helpful a lot. Consider other deterrents like motion lights, loud noises, sometimes sprinklers, things that startle predators are also helpful. And of course, always hike or bike with a friend. It's more fun that way. Besides, it's safer because there's more than panthers out there. So what if you encounter a panther? Well, keep your children and your pets too within sight and close to you. So don't let anything run off. Give them panther space. If you give them enough space, they should behave normally and walk away from you and go back to wherever they came from or go on their merry way where they were headed. Don't run. We talked about that already. Avoid crouching or bending. You don't want to look smaller. So you don't want to look like you're trying to hide. What you want to do is appear larger. You know, put your arms up. You can scream at it if you're comfortable. It's the one thing, maybe you practice. So that way you're not scared if it does happen. So, and then fight back if you're attacked. We talked about that. So safety for people and panthers. And this is a little bit about, you know, how do we still encourage panther conservation? What can you do on the road, since that's killing a lot of our panthers? Observing the posted speed limits is one of them. And you'll notice that some places around the county, we have areas where you should be driving slower at night, and that's because it gives you and the animals more reaction time. You'll also notice signs that says panther crossing. We do have panthers crossing those roads. So whatever you can do to slow down in those areas. And if you know of panthers being killed on a particular road that you're traveling, if you'll slow down in those areas too, we greatly appreciate it. It gives you both time to react in case you see one and they see you. Spend an extra minute. What that means is if you reduce your speed from 60 miles per hour to 45 miles per hour in a 3-mile stretch of road, you will only have lost 1 minute of travel time. But you may save a lot of damage to yourself or injury to yourself by not hitting, and the panther as well, by slowing down in those areas where you are most likely to encounter not just panthers but other wildlife. It's never fun to hit animals in the road. And be aware when driving. So I have a picture there of a raccoon. You can see that its eyes are shining back in the reflection of the light. And so you can observe that on the side of the road, then you know that there's an animal there or in the road. You slow down, give you both an opportunity to increase your reaction time. And if you're looking down a road and you see a lot of reflectors, but then there's one that you know should be there and isn't, probably means an animal has moved between your vehicle and the reflectors. So slow down, you know, give you both an opportunity, and then just be aware when driving, you know, what's around you, what's on the side of the road. I'm always extra cautious when I see deer on the side of the road or other animals. And one thing I'll add too is don't throw your food out the window. Food's biodegradable, but then now it's going to attract panther prey to the side of the road, which is never good for panthers. So we have a lot of neighbors and partners that help us out. So the Conservancy of Southwest Florida is, of course, one of our partners and our neighbors. They help out with the pen assistance, but they also, for smaller livestock, commercial livestock operations, they have some reimbursement programs available there, and they do a lot of education as well. They have been having a campaign lately, and they've had some panthers featured in that. The F-Stop Foundation provides us a lot of pictures. The Fish and Wildlife Foundation of Florida, if you're interested in trying to support panther efforts, you can always contact them. Picture on the left, bottom left, that's Uno, who now lives at the Naples Zoo. You know, shot in the face with birdshot, unfortunately. Yeah, well, yeah, that's unfortunate. So it's usually why I try to bring, you know, my taxidermied animals, because the likelihood of you getting to see a panther is usually fairly small, unless you go to the zoo. That's what I was saying today. But even then, yeah.
There's got so much vegetation in there, you can't see them.
Right, and with panthers being most active, you know, crepuscular animals, yeah, he's sleeping during the day. Plus, it's really hot, so he doesn't want to move around right now. Homosassa, we've got a couple of panthers in captivity up there. We only have a few panthers in captivity, and that's because they're injured and can no longer live in the wild for most of them. The Wings of Hope, Panther Posse, I don't know if you guys have heard of that group. It's operated off the campus of FGCU, and they educate between 3,000 and 4,000 4th and 5th grade students every year. In the fall, they bring them to a classroom there at the university, and they learn about panther habitat. They learn about research, the kittens, the biology, and the panther prey. And then in the spring, they go hiking through Crew, the Corkscrew Regional Ecosystem Watershed at the Marsh Trails. Have you guys ever been out there? It's a pretty neat space. Well, they hike them through panther habitat. When you're walking through there, that's a space panthers utilize, so that they're educating kids about that. If you need more information, you can always check our website, myfwc.com/panther. We have a lot of information available for you there. Some of the reports, if you want to look at, you know, different graph material, you want to keep up with mortalities, if we've discovered any births of kittens and that kind of thing, you can always check that out. And citizen science. So the Panther team is really small. So to collect panther data, we also rely on people to help us do that. And we've got a mechanism where you can report tracks, pictures of tracks, and photographic evidence that you can submit if you think you've taken a picture of a panther. You can visit our website to do that. And now I guess we're ready for questions. So.
car-panther interactions usually fatal?
From what we know, typically we're recovering a deceased carcass of a panther, and they're being hit, during the sunset hours or at night, and we often don't know about it until the next day because most people don't stop to look to see what they hit. Of course, go ahead.
Where is the worst road for panther being hit and killed on the roads?
The worst one?
Well, there's some place that's really bad, like 29 over there bad.
29 is not a good place. The Mockley roads seem to be an issue lately. 41, yeah, we've had panthers sit out in the Golden Gate, some of the roads off Golden Gate Estates. So, because the main population densities in Collier and Eastern Collier, that's any of those travel lanes where they're traveling.
So how many panthers are there? What's the estimated count today in Florida?
Yeah, so the low number is 120, but there could be as many as 230.
120.
Yeah.
And the range that you have designated for them, how many can that really support given their territorial needs?
Yeah, I've had that question before. And that's something, we look at the public lands and we use that to help estimate the number of panthers. And so that's where we start to get into the high end of the number. But, considering panther behavior and habitat and the fact that they don't just utilize public space, yeah, so it will, I suppose time will tell too on how much more development occurs, much more land can be set aside.
So each year, a number of them are killed by cars and other wildlife, probably predators as well. Maybe are bears predators for panthers?
No.
No, they aren't. Do they have any other animal predators?
Alligators.
No.
So as far as interactions between, you mean panthers and alligators or panthers and bears? So yeah, so what we're finding when we recover most panthers, it's vehicles, but they also, we call interspecific aggression, which is when a panther's killed another panther. So yeah, so that's the other factor. Right now we've got 13 collared panthers, so that's 10 that Florida Fish and Wildlife has collared, and then Big Cypress National Preserve runs their own collaring program, and they have 3. So, and then those are monitored every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday by flights from the biology team with FWC. Yeah, it's a good question. Yes?
I thought I saw the slide said that the female's pregnant for only 3 months, and then they have 2 or 3 kids.
Right.
So they could produce a lot of offspring in a year's time, right?
Well, she's not going to reproduce typically until she's raised her young, though. So once she's had the gestation, she's given birth, and it's going to be that 9-month to a 1.5-year period before her kittens depart, before she mates, usually. That's the question.
Who would we call or what number if we spotted like a dead panther along the side of the road?
Oh yeah, so I have the number on my card, so make sure you get a card from me before you leave. Yes, so I feel like that's always important. And if you've hit a panther, you pretty much, you would know it because it's a pretty large animal. Call us then too, because sometimes I get the question about, is it illegal to hit panthers with a car? I'm like, well, nobody does it on purpose, I'm sure. I can't explain what you're doing with your other activities while you're driving, but no. So we always encourage people to call because that's an opportunity for us to recover the cats if we can. So, and we've been able to do that a couple times recently. So.
Has a vehicle panther interaction ever resulted in human fatalities? Do they, steer into a tree or something? Or?
Okay, not that I'm aware of.
No, okay, so it's
Yeah.
pretty much a one-sided deal.
No, but has it resulted in some serious damage to the vehicle? Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
That, yes. So, yeah.
My
So
dog,
dear, no.
my dog hit a deer once. I lost a lot of that Bambi love after that. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, yeah. But you know what? She can use the same tips that we go over for, watching out for wildlife in the roadway. That's good for anything, not just panthers. So, yeah,
Happens
cool.
if you hit one and it's still alive.
Well, don't approach it.
No.
Do call, and that way the number goes to dispatch and they'll contact whenever one of the members of our team, one of the biologists, and then and the veterinarian, and they'll do what they can to recover it.
Don't pick it up and put it in your back, in your trunk.
No, definitely do not do that. Let the professionals handle it. But it's a good question. All right.
Seems like most of the incidents I hear about involve trucks. I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know. Yeah, I'm not sure. I haven't heard that or seen that specifically. So,
And this may go beyond your expertise, but the gestation period struck me as rather brief. Is that characteristic out there, or how does that compare with other species?
oh, how does it compare with other species? Yeah, I suppose it depends. There's different factors that go into it. But I have a little plush kitten on the table, and they're pretty small. They're only about 2 pounds. So you can give them life expectancy and other factors, but I'm not sure. That would be something that I'll have to compare to other things. Well, think about birds. You know, birds lay an egg, in a couple weeks it hatches, and then a couple months or shorter, they leave the nest. So birds are quick. So it seems that it's going to be dependent on the species. But, yeah, it's a pretty good question.
Is there any evidence of the males eating the cubs of another male, like the lions do?
Eating, no. Attacking, I suppose.
Killing?
Yeah, I don't know that we were.
That's
Yeah.
right, because feral cats will.
Yeah.
Yeah, feral cats.
Yeah, so when we talk about interspecific aggression, I mean, it can be male on male. Sometimes it's male on female. Or male on kittens because.
Lions will eat another lion's offspring because they don't want, their rival's offspring to survive. So
Yeah.
any evidence of that?
From what I would understand, I don't think it's so much about that. If the males are attacking other males, it's going to be a territorial issue. Males that are maybe attacking kittens, it's going to be an issue of that they may want to mate with the female. And so, yeah. Yeah, they don't operate quite the same way as lions because lions operate in a pride, so it's a little bit different.
How long do the collars last? Do they get replaced?
Yes. If they typically should last about 2 years. So. They don't always, but they're supposed to. And yes, then they get replaced. So, because you can find those guys. So, okay. Well, thank you, everybody. I appreciate it. Oh, we got one more question?
Can you talk about the comfort level with water? I mean, when I go to Big Cypress, you just look out and there's just so much water around. And I'm sure they try to stay probably dry as much as possible, but with such a large foraging area,
Right.
surely they have to encounter various depths depending on time of year, rainfall, and so on. So,
Sure.
And the big lakes, if they're comfortable enough with shallower, or have they been known to swim lakes and try to find in foraging and so on anyway, but how comfortable are they with water and living around water?
Yeah, they can swim through water, no problem.
They
So.
just try to avoid it, they're just very comfortable.
They don't want to live in it, They, I suppose whenever they can avoid it, they will. And if they're going to swim through it, they're probably trying to swim from one dry section to another one. So, but talked about the Caloosahatchee River. That's one of the things that's come up. We don't know how the females may have gotten north of the river, but that may be one of the possibilities is that they swam. So, yeah. So yeah, they're not afraid of water, but they're not going to want to stay in the water. But their ranges are pretty large, so they're just going to find another dry area of their range if they can. So, it's a good question.
I went to
One more?
Panther Fest that were held up at the North Regional Park there.
Okay, yeah.
Last year or two.
Yeah.
Is that going to come back someday?
Yeah, so it was on hiatus for 2015. In 2016, the Naples Zoo became the new sponsor.
Oh, yes, that's right.
Yep, so this, November 4th, I believe, should be coming up at the Naples Zoo, it's the first Saturday of the month, which is free to call your residents. So yeah, I encourage you guys to come visit. I'll be there.
Well, there we'll look for you.
Good, thank you. All right, looks like we're about to wrap it up. I have a lot of materials and I'll be available a little bit afterward for any questions.